Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjumants and a job come to you guys here today with another deck tech. So today we are going to be taking a look at a standard deck, and it is 4-color tokens. Now, with this deck, we're going to be utilizing green, white, black, and blue. And the biggest reason why I built this deck was because of Master Biomancer. So whenever Gatecrash first came out, I looked at Master Biomancer and I wanted to kind of have an approach to where I could really take advantage of his ability and token production, and being able to produce multiple tokens in a given turn was pretty much the best solution that I had to the question of, well, what's the best kind of thing to play around Master Biomancer. So we are going to take a look at this deck here today. If you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below and I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs. But the first thing that we're taking a look at here is the land base of this deck. So we have 24 lands. Starting off with our shock lands, we have 4 Temple Gardens. We're running 2 Overgrown Tomb, 2 Breeding Pool, 2 Godless Shrine, 1 single Hallowed Fountain. We have a playset of Sunpetal Grove, so 4 of them. 3 Woodland Cemetery, 3 Isolated Chapel, 2 Hinterland Harbor, and then 1 single Vault of the Archangel. So with our land base, it ends up working out quite well for us. Our blue is pretty much just going to be a splash for us. And we have the 2 Hinterland Harbors, we have the 1 Hallowed Fountain, and the 2 breeding pools to provide blue for us. We also have Farseek in the build as well, so we're able to effectively search for breeding pool if we need our source of blue. But other than that, the production of blue isn't really a huge problem for us. The majority of the other things in the deck are going to be white and green, and we also have some black spells and cards that are going to cost black as well, so ultimately ends up working out quite well for us. So now let's take a look at everything else in the deck that we have. So first off, we have Master Biomancer, which is kind of like the whole reason why I built this deck, like I mentioned before. He's a 2/4 for 4, and each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it, equal to Master Biomancer's power, and it's a mutant in addition to its other types. So essentially, if we're able to make Master Biomancer bigger, which the only real way, aside from like the Sorin emblem, would be to play like another Master Biomancer while the first one is out there. So then you kind of have like both of those interactions going on for you, where they're coming in with an additional X amount of counters from the first one and X amount from the second one, which is going to be like 2 from the first one and 4 from the next one. But Master Biomancer allows us to make our tokens somewhat big, where we're not having 1/1 tokens anymore. We're having 3 3s, and our Thragtusk, if it dies, it's giving us a 5/5, and Garruk Primal Hunter makes 5/5s as well. So Master Biomancer is a really cool card for this deck, and it makes tokens really big, and if they're not attacking, they're being turned into really good blockers up against aggro decks. From there, we have Geist-Honored Monk. So it's a 5-cost creature with vigilance, and power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures we control. And whenever it enters the battlefield, we get 2 1/1 flying spirit tokens. So play set a Geist-Honored Monk. Geist-Honored Monk is awesome as a 5-drop just because we're able to drop it, and if we already have like a decent amount of creatures on the battlefield already, Geist-Honored Monk is going to be pretty big. With Vigilance, it's really awesome just because it's able to swing each turn, and you can still keep it as a blocker, and the creatures that it produces are flying, so you can kind of like assure yourself that you can at least have creatures that can fly over and deal damage to your opponent in that sense. So I love Geist-Honored Monk in this deck. It does side out sometimes for some other stuff that we have in the sideboard. However, having it as a playset in the main board is pretty awesome, whether we're trying to stack the board and get like a huge presence for ourselves, or if we're just trying to make more blockers and try to like overcome the aggro situation that our opponent's putting up against us. From there, we have Thragtusk. So when we're playing green, we want to have some pretty solid ways of gaining back life, so Thragtusk is that way to gain back life. He's a 5/3 for 5, and we gain 5 life whenever he enters the battlefield, and whenever he leaves, we get a 3/3. And if Master Biomancer is out there, the tokens are going to be at least 5/5s. If there's just one Master Biomancer out there, then if there are multiple Master Biomancers, they can become even bigger. From there, we have Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, so we're getting into our Planeswalkers. We're running 2 Sorin in the build. So he's a 3 loyalty, 4 cost. +1 puts out 1/1 tokens with lifelink, so it's going to be awesome if we're able to make them into 3/3s or bigger. Just because of that lifelink, we can gain back a pretty decent amount of life consistently. His -2 gives us an emblem where creatures we control get +1/+0, and the emblems do stack, so we can put out multiple. And the -6, the ultimate's pretty nice, where we can get rid of 3 target creatures and or planeswalkers, and then they come back from the grave under our control, which is pretty solid. But ultimately with Sorin, it's going to be that we're making tokens, and if we were able to make those tokens a little bit bigger, awesome for us, or we're making the emblems so we can swing alpha. From there, we have Garruk Primal Hunter, so we're running him as a 3-of in here, and we have enough green sources that we don't have to run Garruk Relentless, and we actually are able to utilize Garruk Primal Hunter pretty effectively with the triple green cost. But 3 loyalty, and he is pretty awesome for his +1 ability to make 3/3 tokens for us. He can also allow us to draw cards with his -3 ability equal to the greatest power amongst creatures that we control, and -6 puts out 6/6 worms equal to the amount of lands that we control. So Garruk Primal Hunter, the biggest thing about him is his +1 and his -3, and just being able to stack the board with a ton of 3/3s is what I like the most about him. So Primal Hunter is really awesome. Moving away from our creatures and planeswalkers, we have Farseek. So like I mentioned it before, it's able to kind of let us fix a little bit for our mana base, but also it lets us accelerate, hit bigger things a little bit faster. If we would hit like Garruk Primal Hunter a turn sooner, that's definitely a good advantage that we could have, or play like Sorin a turn sooner. Ultimately, Farseek is pretty useful for being able to fix into playing stuff like Primal Hunter, which is triple green, or Biomancer, which is blue. So playset of Farseek. We're also running Orzhov Charm in here, so Orzhov Charm is a playset as well. So we can return target creature we control and all auras that are attached to it to its owner's hand, or we can destroy target creature and we'll lose life equal to its toughness, or we can return target creature card with converted mana cost 1 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. The only real mode that we're using Orzhov Charm for is going to be essentially to get rid of creatures. However, it's not limited to that. We can also return cards like Thragtusk if we need to. In the case of playing up against aggro, I've done it multiple times where I'll block with Thragtusk. I'll use Orzhov Charm to return Thragtusk to my hand. And the block is still going to go through. No damage is going to be dealt from that said creature that was being blocked by Thragtusk. I get the Thragtusk back, and then I'm able to play him next turn. So that's like one of those nice interactions to have. Same thing with like Geist-Honored Monk to make more tokens. However, with the Orzhov Charm, the biggest thing is just getting rid of creatures. Losing life, yes, it's a setback. However, sometimes it's like necessary if we're heading up against stuff like Obsidots or Boros Reckoners, annoying things that definitely have a really good presence on the board. Orzhov Charm is going to allow us to be able to get rid of things of that nature. So playset of Orzhov Charm. Then we have some token producers. So we have Gather the Townsfolk. So I have 2 Gather the Townsfolk here. So it's a 2-cost card, and it puts out 2 1/1 white humans onto the battlefield. And if Faithful Hour is going to be relevant for us, if we control, or if we have 5 or less life, we're going to put 5 tokens into our control instead. So Faithful Hour ends up helping us in that sense where we're able to make more tokens. And like the biggest thing is like up against aggro-based decks where they're going to be the ones that are going to get you down in life that quickly. Up against them, being able to make multiple tokens is going to be pretty nice. So Gather the Townsfolk is good for that. We're also running Lingering Souls, as you guys could imagine. So it puts out 2 1/1 flyers, 2 1/1 white flying spirit tokens, and it has a flashback for 2. And the original casting cost is 3 mana. We're running Intangible Virtue as a playset as well, so creature tokens we control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. So on top of being able to swing in and they're going to be a little bit bigger, they also have vigilance, so we're able to use them as blockers. So whenever it comes to like the flying soul tokens, we're able to swing with them and still have them as blockers up against other decks. So the Intangible Virtue ends up being really solid for us. And then we just have a singleton Oblivion Ring in the main board. I also have one more in the sideboard, but I had one slot open, so I did want to use one element of like more removal that wouldn't be limited to just like creatures or something like that. So Oblivion Ring lets us exile non-land permanents, which is pretty relevant for us. So that's the main board that we have for the deck. Now let's take a look at what we have in the sideboard. So for our sideboard here, first off we have Rest in Peace. So Rest in Peace is going to be nice for us to be able to combat any of the combo decks that are playing off of Reanimator interactions, like the Angel of Glory's Rise combos. So we're going to be running 3 Rest in Peace in the sideboard, and I pretty much run 3 Rest in Peace in terms of running like Graveyard Hate whenever I'm running white, unless like my deck happens to have like some heavy interaction with the graveyard. Now, Rest in Peace is not going to allow us to play our own Lingering Souls, but that's actually not even a problem. Being able to thwart any combo decks is much more valuable than being able to play like Lingering Souls, which wouldn't have any real benefit to us because those combo decks can win the turn that they combo off. But Rest in Peace lets us have that nice advantage where we're able to exile their graveyard whenever we play the Rest in Peace. Even if it's destroyed, it still exiles their graveyard on coming into the battlefield, so that's always nice for us. And then they have to like kind of rebuild their strategy again, which buys us time to actually be able to beat them down. So 3 Rest in Peace. I'm also running Trostani, Selesnya's Voice. So Trostani is like one of those really nice ways of being able to have the means of being able to gain life. And this was kind of like my approach to Rock's Faithmender that decks like Bant Control would be using. I like Trostani just because it has the ability to let us populate. So we're able to populate the tokens that we are going to be making and the tokens that we already have made. And on top of like something like Master Biomancer, where they're going to be entering in with additional +1/+1 counters, being able to gain life whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control and we gain life equal to its toughness is going to be pretty sweet. It's going to be a pretty nice way to be able to effectively gain back life essentially every turn. So I'm running 2 Trostani in the sideboard for like any aggro decks, anything that's just trying to burn us out, beat us down, and try to do it like really, really quick. On its own, Trostani is a pretty decent blocker as well. It's a 2/5 for 4, so it has a pretty decent body for being able to block big things. From there, we have Centaur Healer as well. So I have 2 Centaur Healer in the sideboard. It's a 3/3 for 3, and it lets us gain 3 life. So we sided in against those really just gritty, burn, and aggro-based decks where it's just trying to just beat us down and get us to 0 as quick as possible before we can have like any immense board presence or anything like that. So another 2 Centaur Healer just to keep us in the game. But between Trostani and Centaur Healer, they're both cards that we want to be siding in up against like the really aggressive matchups. From there we have Negate. So I'm running 2 Negate in the sideboard where we can counter non-creature spells. So up against the matchups like Control and the mid-range builds that are going to be running a lot of non-creature things, we're able to effectively counter anything they're doing, as well as any of the flash variants as well. They have a pretty wide array of non-creature spells that we can counter and effectively do so to kind of keep them from gaining any advantage. But Negate's ultimately the best way to combat any like big spells like Sphinx's Revelations, Planeswalkers, anything that's annoying in that sense. From there, we also have some reset buttons for the aggro matchups. So Supreme Verdict is in our sideboard as a 3 of, where we're able to destroy all creatures and Supreme Verdict can't be countered. So having this as a 3 of is pretty essential up against aggro-based decks, especially stuff like Naya Blitz, where they can get a really huge board presence, and we can stall them out. We can stall them out pretty well with our token production. However, there's just going to be a certain point where we can't really create as many creatures as we need to be blocking every single turn. So Supreme Verdict is going to be in our sideboard here, where our opponent's going to overextend. They're going to try to make like all the creatures that they can possibly put onto the board and like overwhelm us. And then we're just like, all right, well, Supreme Verdict, we reset the board and we still have more elements to be able to make tokens, like with our Planeswalkers, even flashing back stuff with like Lingering Souls, even Thragtusk. Whenever Thragtusk dies, we're going to get a 3/3 off of it. So ultimately, it's not bad. Supreme Verdict is like a necessary evil. Yes, it blows up our creatures, but it blows up any creatures that really heavy aggro decks are going to have as well. So 3 reset buttons in the sideboard, 1 Oblivion Ring, like I mentioned before. So we're going to have 2 of them in between the main board and the sideboard. And then 2 Rootborn Defenses. So I wanted to have Rootborn Defense because it lets us populate, and it also turns creatures we control indestructible until the end of the turn. So it was kind of like my answer to other control-based decks where, yes, we have like stuff like Negate, but Negate's not going to let us hit into Supreme Verdict and be able to counter it because Supreme Verdict is uncounterable. So Rootborn Defenses is the best way to kind of like overcome that, where our creatures are indestructible, and whenever they cast Supreme Verdict, like, it's not really going to do anything to us because, well, they're indestructible. They can't be destroyed. Populate is somewhat relevant, I suppose. It's not really as huge as just being able to turn the creatures indestructible, but ultimately that's the main board and sideboard that I have for my 4-color token build. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can use it as a reference, as well as a playlist of all the previous decks that I've covered on the channel. So if you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. But until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.